know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk exposes the Brushy Bill story's fake death scene in Brushy Bill Roberts' book, Alias Billy the Kid. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. The expected high point of Oliver Brushy Bill Roberts' Billy the Kid impersonation is the July 14th, 1881 Fort Sumner death scene. It had to contradict the one piece of history that readers likely knew, that Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid. That death scene was also make or break for the ambitions of Brushy's hoax coach, salesman WilliamVMorrison, and his hoax book author, English teacher C.L. Sonneshin. The death scene is in Alias Billy the Kid's autobiographical chapter, The Brushy Bill Story. Notoriously garrulous Brushy had years to perfect his tale since his Billy the Kid delusion began in the 1930s in Gladewater, Texas. Then, from 1949 to 1950, Morrison coached him for his November 30th, 1950 Billy the Kid pardon hearing. But the death scene isn't what you'd expect. First of all, it's tiny. From deciding to get beef for dinner to his partners being shot dead is just 11 lines. And the whole segment, titled Death by Moonlight, is just 50 lines. Second, unlike Brushy's other confabulations, he doesn't simply insert himself into lifted history. And that would have been easy to do. He just had to claim that his partner, Billy Barlow, entered Peter Maxwell's dark bedroom, was mistaken for himself as Billy the Kid, and was shot dead by Pat Garrett, who then hid that crime. Instead, Brushy claimed his having a shootout with a fictional posse after they killed his partner in a brand new location. The plot thickens. As stated in other talks, it's fixed up better Brushy, not real Brushy, who talks in Alias Billy the Kid. But we do know real Brushy's death scene. He gave it in his November 30th, 1950 pardon hearing with Governor T.J. Maybury and assembled experts. One expert was historian J.W. Hendron. Hendron published it 4 years before Alias Billy the Kid's version in his January 5th, 1951's Highway Happenings magazine article titled No Pardon for Billy. Hendron wrote, "Here's how Brushy explains the way he escaped death at Fort Sumner on the night of July 14th, 1881. He says he was asked to go to Pete Maxwell's house for some meat. He suspected he was being tricked into something and instead sent Billy Barlow, who was drunk. When Barlow entered Maxwell's bedroom, he was shot by Garrett. I'll repeat that. When Barlow entered Maxwell's bedroom, he was shot by Garrett. So, real Brushy did do the expected. He simply switched Billy Barlow for Billy Bonney in the historical scene. So there's a mystery. Who spoke the alias Billy the Kid tale? Was it Brushy in a prompted tape recording by Morrison? Was it a forgery by Sonishin? But first, the tale had to get Brushy as Billy to Fort Sumner with no sources after Billy's April 28, 1881 jailbreak to the death day. Brushy's standby, Pat Garrett's 1882 book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, was no help since it gave Garrett's definitive killing of Billy. The other standby, Walter Noble Burns' 1926 book, The Saga of Billy the Kid, backed the Garrett killing. Brushy was stuck with his name-dropping and confabulating trick. So, leaving out getting to Fort Sumner, Brushy simply landed himself there as Billy in Charlie Bowdry's widow's home. The source for his error was The Saga of Billy the Kid, which fictitiously used Manuela Bowdry for a scene. It made up that Garrett said to his deputy, John W. Poe, "As long as we're here, we might as well try watching Charlie Bowdry's old home. Manuela Bowdry, Charlie Bowdry's widow, still lives there, and if the kid's in these parts, he's probably hiding there." In fact, Manuela Bowdry had left Fort Sumner after Garrett killed Charlie on December 22, 1880. Brushy also didn't know why Billy went to Fort Sumner, so he used his fable's all-purpose motive, revenge. As Billy, he went there to kill John Chisholm and Barney Mason. To kill Chisholm, Brushy said he went to his South Spring River Ranch near Fort Sumner, but found only a, quote, Mexican cowboy. The source for Chisholm as an adversary was Billy's December 12, 1880 letter to Lew Wallace. It stated, "If some impartial party were to investigate this matter, they would find it far different from the impression put out by Chisholm and his tools." But Billy's vendetta was fable. Its source footnote is Belle Hudson's 1949 fictionalized book, Billy the Kid. It stated, "Old John S. Chisholm heard that Billy the Kid was on the loose again, and he was one of the main ones threatened." Another source footnote used elsewhere in alias Billy the Kid was Lew Wallace's June 8, 1902 New York World Magazine Outlaw Myth article titled "General Lew Wallace Writes a Romance of Billy the Kid." It stated, "Billy began his career with an oath to kill John Chisholm." In reality, Chisholm's Fort Sumner area ranch was Bosque Grande. By 1875, he'd moved far away to his actual South Spring River Ranch near Roswell and 78 miles from Fort Sumner. And the hoaxers were also unaware that Billy went to Fort Sumner to be with his sweetheart, Paulita Maxwell. For his Barney Mason revenge tale, Brushy stated, "I left Chisholm's looking for Barney Mason. He started to ride up to the camp where I was staying. When I came out, he left mighty quick." The source footnote is again Belle Hudson's 1949 fictional Billy the Kid. It stated, From the top of a hill, Barney Mason and Jim Curtin saw a sheep camp tent. Barney grew very nervous, and when Billy the Kid walked out, he rode away as fast as he could go. Then Brushy tried to fill his information vacuum with special knowledge tricks. One trick was claiming Barney Mason was related to Pat Garrett by marriage. That error came from Brushy's misunderstanding they're having a double marriage as friends. Another trick has Brushy say, "I knew Celsa and Pat's wife," name not given, "who were sisters to Saval Gutierrez. Celsa was one of my sweethearts when I was in Fort Sumner. Her brother Saval lived in Fort Sumner. Saval went up to Cañaditas and got Celsa for me. She wanted to go to Mexico with me." Celsa and Saval being siblings is a huge, fatal error. In reality, they were a married couple. The error used the saga of Billy the Kid's calling Saval Pat Garrett's brother-in-law. Brushy guessed Saval and Celsa were siblings because they had the same last name of Gutierrez, but they were married cousins. Saval was Garrett's brother-in-law by Garrett's marriage to Celsa's sister, Apollinaria. Brushy worsened his error by confabulating Celsa as his sweetheart, wanting to run off with him, with Saval facilitating. Morrison also coached that error, as seen in his letter of March 19, 1955, to historian Robert N. Mullin. He wrote, "I believe the records in San Miguel and Debaca counties will indicate that Saval, Celsa, and Apollinari, misspelled, were children of Dolores Gutierrez. Billy Roberts, his made-up name for Brushy, told me they were. Celsa was definitely the sweetheart of the kid." In reality, Billy knew his friends Saval and Celsa were married. He even began his July 14, 1881 death walk from their Fort Sumner house, carrying their butcher knife to cut a steak from the Maxwell house's hanging side of beef. That famous butcher knife, with its famous provenance, was later bought by historian Frederick Nolan from the Gutierrez family. Also seen again is Brushy's fatal ignorance of Billy's real sweetheart, Paulita Maxwell, for whom he'd risked his life to return to Fort Sumner. Another special knowledge trick was Brushy's claim that he, as Billy, hid out at the Yerby Ranch, where Yerby kept horses and mules for him when Charlie Bowdry worked there. The prompt source was Billy's December 12, 1880 letter to Lew Wallace. Excerpted, Billy stated, "During my absence, Deputy Sheriff Garrett went by Mr. Yerby's ranch and took a pair of mules of mine, which I had left with Mr. Bowdry, who was in charge of Mr. Yerby's cattle." In reality, Yerby's was not Billy's hideout, nor was Thomas Yerby Billy's friend. Then comes the Fort Sumner death scene, which Sonish entitled Death by Moonlight. Sonishin's source for Moonlight was eyewitness John W. Poe's 1933 book, The Death of Billy the Kid. It stated, "The moon was shining very brightly." The saga of Billy the Kid said, "The kid's figure stood out clearly in the moonlight." The historical death scene has three famous parts: a bright moonlit night, Billy walking to the Maxwell house to cut himself a steak from the hanging side of beef on its porch, and his first entering Peter Maxwell's dark bedroom where Pat Garrett fatally shot him. So, it's astounding that Brushy's alias Billy the Kid tale has no bedroom scene. He has his pal, Billy Barlow, shot dead at the Maxwell house's so-called back porch by Garrett's so-called posse, not by Garrett. Brushy has himself wounded in a shootout with that posse in the house's so-called yard. The source for the Garrett posse era was the saga of Billy the Kid. It fabricated, so westward out of Lincoln rode Sheriff Garrett and his posse, their quarry a slender youth. In reality, Garrett had no posse. He was just with his deputies, John William Poe and Thomas Kip McKinney. Brushy's source for fictional Billy Barlow is uncertain, but the name was in popular songs. Brushy's family member, Roy L. Hawes, in his 2015 book, Brushy Bill, Proof That His Claim to Be Billy the Kid Was a Hoax, found it in a 1930s song called Cuddy Wren and in a Southwestern ballad called Billy Barlow. In Sonishin's collected papers is also a July 24, 1963 letter from a Tom Swan about a Billy Barlow song collected by John A. Lomax. Its lyrics state, "Let's go hunting," says Risky Bob. "Let's go hunting," says Robin to Bob. "Let's go hunting," says Dan'l to Joe. "Let's go hunting," says Billy Barlow. Brushy has himself spending the death scene's day at Saval Gutierrez's house. He makes up that at night, Garrett and his posse arrived when he and Billy Barlow were away at a dance. He, Barlow, and, quote, the girls then rode into Fort Sumner, where Jesus Silva, name-dropped Peter Maxwell's foreman, warned him about Garrett, and the dance girls left. In reality, Brushy's fantasy dance scene missed Billy's desperate hiding out as the country's most hunted man. Brushy states that he guessed that Garrett would visit his brother-in-law Saval, so he and Billy Barlow went to Jesus Silva's house. Silva was cooking dinner, but Barlow wanted, quote, fresh beef from Maxwell's house. Sensing a so-called trap, Brushy lets Barlow go. Brushy states, "I thought that Garrett might still be in town, and I wanted to meet him in daylight so I could beat him to it." To be noted is Brushy's making Garrett a deadly enemy. As will be seen in later talks, the major 21st century Brushy backing hoax would fake them as best friends, with Garrett purposely killing Barlow to let Brushy escape. In Brushy's tale, after Barlow leaves, he hears shots. So he runs, quote, through the gate into Maxwell's backyard in the bright moonlight and started shooting at shadows along the house. Then he saw that, quote, one of their first shots had killed my partner on the back porch. That comes with a shocking prompt source footnote. And it reveals why Brushy had Barlow shot on the back porch. Brushy's prompter was C.L. Sonishin himself. That means that Sonishin invented the hoax's biggest lie, other than Brushy being Billy. Sonishin's small font prompt source footnote takes up a third of the page. It's his own shoddy research on the death scene. It was his April 15th, 1944 interview of Jack Fountain, a son of Albert Jennings Fountain, Billy's 1881 Messiah trial's second attorney. In reality, Albert Jennings and Jack, living in Messiah, had no personal evidence about Billy's Fort Sumner killing 213 miles away. And Jack, born August 31st, 1875, was then under 6. But Sonneshin used 68-year-old Jack's tale, claiming Pat Garrett told him the outside victim version. Any competent researcher would have asked Jack why it contradicted Garrett's own bedroom version in his 1882 book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. Sonneshin didn't. Jack claimed that Garrett told him that Billy was at the, quote, house of a woman across the street and went to get beef, which was in a, quote, little outer room beside Peter Maxwell's bedroom. Outside at the beef, Billy asked Peter inside his bedroom who was there and was told nobody. Jack continued, Garrett in the room shot at Billy outside the room. He shot him dead. Sonneshin, making Jack gospel and promoting his own research to preempt real Billy the Kid historians, added that there are many versions of the killing, but this is best since it, quote, places the victim outside Maxwell's bedroom. The plot thickens. Jack said something else. He said the victim was Billy. But dishonest Sonneshin hid that, making Billy Barlow the victim. So this source footnote proves that Sonneshin was researching Billy the Kid 5 years before partnering with Morrison. He was already trying to make himself a big fish in Billy the Kid history when Morrison offered him the chance to back Brushy. And he now used Brushy's book to advertise his own fakery. See Talk 50 link below for more on Sonneshin. There was worse. Ignorant of the Maxwell house's layout, Sonneshin added to Jack's tale. Sonneshin made up that Maxwell's bedroom was at the house's back. Ergo, the shot victim lay on the back porch. So Brushy, coached by Morrison with the Jack plus Sonneshin tale for his tape recordings, dutifully confabulated a death scene with back porch Barlow. Sticking to the back location, Brushy added that when he heard shots, he ran into the Maxwell's backyard and shot at, quote, shadows along the house. In reality, Jack Fountain had spouted old-timer malarkey. The actual side of beef hung on the Maxwell house's cool north porch. Maxwell's bedroom was on the opposite side of the house at its front southeastern corner. Neither beef nor bedroom were at a back porch. Backing this weird scene, Morrison responded to historian Frederick Nolan on August 7, 1957, by lying. He wrote, Brushy's contention that the wrong man was killed on Maxwell's porch was verified by McKinney and cannot be controverted by any kind of evidence. Brushy, continuing with his anonymous shooting posse and being in the Maxwell house's backyard, had himself shot through the mouth, left shoulder, and across the forehead. Note the glitch in Brushy's tale. If the Phantom Posse had already killed the man they believed to be Billy the Kid, though Billy Barlow, why were they shooting at random man Brushy? As to the fictitious yard, its source was the saga of Billy the Kid. It stated they carried the body across the Maxwell yard into a deserted carpenter's shop. In reality, when Lucien Bonaparte Maxwell established the town of Fort Sumner in 1870, he retained its original military layout, with its buildings, including his family's converted officers' quarters house, being on the perimeter of the original 300 by 400 foot expanse of a parade ground. But what about that shooting posse? It seems to be Brushy's own creation, possibly from his 1930s Billy the Kid impersonation, to jibe with his scars, which his family caretakers said were actually from his farm labor work. In the pardon hearing, he even showed Governor T.J. Maybury his forehead scar from that make-believe shootout. In reality, there was no death scene gun battle, just the ambush of Billy in the bedroom, with the first of Garrett's 2 shots being fatal, and with deputies Poe and McKinney lethally posted outside in case Billy escaped the bedroom. The historical death scene is in Talk 33, linked below. Brushy's Phantom Posse shootout later presented a headache to the hoaxers. Con artist Morrison took it on by spouting double talk in a letter of January 6, 1956, to a Rick Steinke. Morrison wrote, "It may seem strange that no mention was made of the fight in Maxwell's yard, but even stranger things than that have occurred in Garrett's activities. Remember, Garrett was in enemy territory, whereas the Kid was at home. Garrett may have been a victim of circumstances, the same as the time he slipped up on Oliver Lee in an attempt to kill him. Many of these facts are little known." In reality, the shooting posse scene was another fatal error, revealing that Brushy was never at the Fort Sumner death scene. After being shot, Brushy has himself stumble, quote, "into the gallery of an adobe behind Maxwell's yard fence," where a Mexican woman pulls him inside. Then Celso Gutierrez enters to tell him they were passing off Billy Barlow's body as his, and, quote, "they would not leave Maxwell's for the night because they were afraid of being mobbed." The source for mobbing is John W. Poe's 1933 book, The Death of Billy the Kid. Poe wrote, "We spent the remainder of the night on the Maxwell premises, keeping constantly on our guard, as we were expecting to be attacked by friends of the dead man." In reality, Poe's statement demolishes Billy Barlow as the victim, since Poe was confirming the townspeople's identification of Billy's body by holding a night vigil for it at the town's carpenter's shop. And attack was feared because the townspeople were enraged by certainty that Billy had been killed. Furthermore, narrator Celsa, in whose mouth Brushy put Barlow's body substitution and Poe's quote, would not have been privy to statements made by Garrett and his deputies inside the Maxwell house. So, Brushy Bill's autobiography for the July 14, 1881 Fort Sumner death scene showed no special knowledge, coaching by hoax accomplices, parroting of sources, confabulating, fatal errors, and fatal ignorance, all proving he wasn't Billy Bonney. And it showed the labor done by the hoaxers to trick readers. But the fact that let me crack the Brushy Bill hoax along with its hoaxers was still hidden in this 1955 book. Under that Death by Moonlight subtitle, Brushy states, "I ran through the gate into Maxwell's backyard in the bright moonlight." Moonlight was correct, but it would take 43 years before new information appeared showing why it was fatal to Brushy's, Sonishin's, and Morrison's hoax. And it would take 48 years for Brushy's tape-recorded transcript to become a public record in a 21st century rerun of the hoax by New Mexico public officials and reveal to me all that real Brushy said about that night and its moon. The talk to follow exposes Brushy Bill's fatal moon error. It brings down the whole house of cards of his imposter scam and its parade of hoaxers into the 21st century.